I'm so honored to be here today, to be in the shadow of the border, but in the shadow of a place I grew up. I grew up 15 miles from the border in a little town called La Mesa. La Mesa means the table, for those that don't know. Next to El Cajon, which means the box, for those that don't know. Near Chula Vista, which means pretty view, for those that don't know. Actually, it means that the original Spanish missions and missionaries had very little imagination when they named my city. But I grew up here. My grandfather had a place in Tijuana, in those very hills over there that I see. And at that place, he had wonderful dinners that we'd attend and have a great time. And I remember coming right here, and I'd look on over at the border that went right into the ocean right there. And I remember seeing a dolphin sail right over that fence. The most amazing sight I had ever seen, and well, it was a sunset was happening. And I looked at that and I thought, how free that animal is. And so many times people aren't free. But I look and see that this is our chance to say our views and our beliefs. Because many times when they look at the border, it's decided from places like Washington or Mexico City. But it isn't decided from people that actually live and work in this border here. I do. I have. For all my life, I've lived here. My grandparents came from Chihuahua, Mexico in 1910. They came to Logan Heights. They started Logan Heights, that little barrio of Logan Heights. They're the first Mexican family actually to come to Logan Heights. At that time, Logan Heights was really a boring middle-class neighborhood. Once they came there, all the white people left. It was called the Great White Flight of Logan Heights that ended up in La Jolla. My family brought things like cockfighting, loud music, great food, and barbecues in the backyard. They brought culture. That's the thing that we do. We bring culture. And the culture here is a cross-border culture. It's a different kind of culture than any other culture in the entire world. A lot of times people look at the images of Latinos here in the United States, and they talk about building greater and bigger and giant walls, almost like in Games of Thrones with that big, gigantic wall there to hold out the white walkers. There they want to hold out the brown walkers. That's what I assume. But the truth is you can't hold out a border. Borders never worked. The Great Wall of China never worked. The Berlin Wall never worked. Walls have never worked. People say that walls, strong walls, make for good neighbors. I don't believe that's true. I think good neighbors are meant by mutual understanding, mutual respect, mutual love. That's what makes good neighbors. And I have to tell you, when I've spent time in Tijuana and also in San Diego, these are two great neighbors, two great cultures together, and we make a hyperculture, a new culture, if you will. And since I work in Hollywood, I look at the images in TV. And according to the USC Annenberg study, they talked about the images of Latinos in the United States. They found out that 38% of the Latino women were either naked or partially clothed. And the Latinos themselves, less than 5% were seen in the media, which means we're underrepresented and underclothed, and something is terribly wrong with that. That's what talking and being here for the TED Talk is changing. It's actually bringing up points of view. It's actually saying that my family, that people wouldn't understand. My father served in World War II at 17. My uncle, Joe Valle, from Boone, Iowa, and yes, there are Mexicans in Boone, Iowa. There are Mexicans there. I grew up on good old Midwestern food. I grew up on ham, tortillas, ambrosia salad, wrapped in a flour tortilla, but it was our Mexican food from the Midwest. That uncle died in World War II. Joe Valle, who was captured by the Japanese in the Philippines, marched to a concentration camp for POWs, and they actually killed him at the end of the war before he was able to be helped. My father came back from that war, came to San Diego, worked at North Island Naval Air Station, loved this country and loved being an American citizen. And he is, like most Latinos, patriots. In fact, the highest decorated people with decorations in the Army per capita is actually Mexican Americans. We fight and die for this country constantly. My father went on to Vietnam. He went on to Vietnam to work there. And I asked him when he went to Vietnam, he said, during the holiday, Rick. I said, what holiday is that? He said, the Tet holiday. And I said, you were there during the Tet offensive? He said, yes, I went there to work for the overtime. I got plenty of overtime in Vietnam. He was a civil servant that worked at North Island Naval Air Station and went to Vietnam for the overtime. And those are stories you don't get to see in the media. You actually don't see our images or people that are really done in the media that way. And that's one of the problems we have. And I think because people have this idea of the border, that's not true. The truth is, I grew up in La Mesa, California. La Mesa, California, and at that time, there were very few Latinos there. There's only 3 Latino families in all of La Mesa, California. And I have a slightly sad story to tell that I will tell. In La Mesa, California, what happened to me, because of ignorance and misunderstanding, I was called a wetback. And I'd never heard the term before. It didn't sound like a bad word, dry back, quarterback, halfback, wetback. Didn't sound like a bad word. And even when I'd hear Latinos on the other side, Mexicans calling me pocho, I thought it meant primo, cousin. That's all I thought it was. It was always very innocent that way. But there I was in La Mesa, California, and one day this kid grabbed my ball from me from school, and he said, "That's my ball." I said, "No, it's my ball." And he says, "No, it's my ball." And he pushed me on the ground, and he took the ball, and he says, "Well, it's my ball now, wetback." I had never heard that term. So just to play it safe, I kicked his ass. I beat this kid up and down that schoolyard and finally got picked on and grabbed by this teacher, and the teacher grabbed me. And first of all, I'm very light-skinned for a Latino. I'm güero. For those who don't speak Spanish, güero means tall, good-looking Latino male. And there a teacher walked up to me. She said, "Why'd you beat Bradley? Why'd you beat Bradley?" I said, "Because he called me a wetback." And she said, "Are you Mexican?" I said, "Yes." "Then you are a wetback." I wasn't angry till years later when I realized what she had said. I actually apologized to the kid. But here's the nice part of that story. The 2 other families that lived there was a family that lived up the street, the Ochoas, and a family that lived down the street on a chicken ranch, who I considered far more Mexican than me, because they had a chicken actually walk through their front room, and that, to me, that was very Mexican. And they played ranchero music, and they were more Mexican than me. And I remember seeing that. But here's the nice part of the story. That family was Juan Vargas. Juan Vargas is a congressman today in Washington. The other family was Ellen Ochoa, the first Mexican-American astronaut. An astronaut, a congressman, and myself, who is one of only 3 Latinos in the history of Broadway that had a play on Broadway that he wrote and starred in. 3 Latinos from La Mesa, California. Look what we have done, and have we ever heard that story before? Have we ever seen that image before? So when I look at the border, I think a border is something we should share, not let it be something that separates us, because we are sharing this border. We're sharing this border, and it's making both sides stronger. And that cross-cultural border, and I can tell you on a personal level, when people talk about building the bigger border and using it in politics, because that's what it is. It's a political thing to bring this up. Every year they did it. And it goes back to 1848 when President Polk believed in manifest destiny, and he said, "We're going to take this land." And actually, he went to buy San Francisco. But he ended up causing the war. But that war is something that created this border. And I think that border is something that's now powerful and strong. And I think this wall only reminds us of all our humanity together. And if we can concentrate on that and leave the politics out and just talk about the great culture that we are today and the betterment of all the Latinos that come to the United States, 54 million Latinos inside the United States. And we see the economic power. That is the same spending power as the nation of Canada. And our 3rd largest trading partner, bigger than France, Germany, and combined, is Mexico. We see the trade, and we see the culture and the vibrancy that's here, that I believe we have a great future ahead of us. And I believe this border will be something that's not a barrier, but something that we share. And that's what I believe in from a very personal perspective of someone that was born here. Thank you.